Happy Wednesday, everyone. John Lorden here with a Brain Scratch Searchlight update. There's a lot of new information that's kicking out around the case of the disappearance of Maya Millete. So I wanted to give you guys kind of a brief update on these new points. I'm getting the feeling, and I'm actually seeing in some media sources, that the family might be getting a little bit frustrated with how the investigation is going. And there's someone in particular that did a little investigation of their own kind of early on in this case, something that we didn't know about at the time that we did the original coverage. And some of the details that he's bringing out, pretty disturbing. Now, if you watched the original video, you know all eyes are on the husband in this case. If you didn't watch the original video, I've got a link to it in the description box down below. You probably want to check that out before we continue with this case. But in short, he says his wife locked herself up in the bedroom, and she locks herself up in this bedroom for a couple days. And then at some point he notices that she isn't there anymore. And we now have a missing persons case. I know, kind of hard to believe on the outset. And quite honestly, with the information that we're seeing kick out now at the 3-month mark, it's getting harder and harder to actually believe. But let's go ahead and start looking at some of the articles over at fox5sandiego.com. Private investigator takes on Maya Millete missing persons case. This is one of the things I was wondering about in the first video, would be how effective could a private investigator be in a case like this, where it seems to be something that's happened within the home, something within the four walls. And of course, yes, a private investigator can help with some social information, kind of routing out that type of stuff. If one of the spouses was cheating on the other, they could certainly find leads into that. Or if someone else is involved in some way, maybe they could help establish some leads to that. But with a case of this nature, I was kind of questioning, how could they really help? Here we had a private investigator actually willing to take this case on at no charge, at least for a number of days. Quote, I started getting involved when people started asking me why I wasn't involved, said Bill Garcia, a California licensed private investigator. He drives himself there. He gets set up for about 5 days of work. Some of the things he's talking about doing, one of them is he wants to check the cameras on the highway that record license plates for who's driving by. I don't know how he'd have access to that information necessarily, so I don't know if that's really in the scope of things that he can do. In another article I saw that he mentioned possibly helping with some drone searches. Of course, that would certainly be helpful with the search efforts, and we know her family working very hard on the search efforts still currently. It seems like at least once a week there is a major search effort that's going on. But he does offer to put in 5 free days of work on this case. However, about as soon as I saw this article, and this is an article back from late February, I saw a follow-up article. California missing mother's family no longer has PI because police don't want the case jeopardized. So it seems like he basically shows up, starts doing some work, and they kind of wave him off and say, we don't want this around this case. Quote, we had a PI, but it didn't really work out because there was really no information that he could have brought forward because the Chula Vista Police Department was keeping everything hush-hush. For now, they don't want to jeopardize anything, said Richard Droulet, Millete's brother-in-law. So it's interesting to me that you would have a free resource like that, someone that could help, and especially just with the drone search stuff. I mean, if you want to tell the PI, don't go talking to the neighbors or please leave those avenues of investigation to us. Isn't there still some other things that he might be able to do to help? It seems like everything just breaks down in terms of this effort. Back to another quote from the brother-in-law. The police haven't really told us anything. They haven't really given us any details on anything that they found from the search warrant. He also said that the private investigator wanted to interview some of the neighbors, but the police asked him not to, which is really unfortunate. It would have helped a lot, he says. Now, I think we do have to assume police have likely interviewed the neighbors. I would assume that they looked for every camera that they could find that was around that house and got to those people and asked them for help. But is that a perfect effort? Sometimes it's a matter of knocking on a door and the person doesn't answer, and another person comes along at the right time and knocks on the door and the person does. So it's hard to know if that couldn't have been helpful, just having someone else go through and talk to the neighbors again. I don't know how harmful that could have been. Unfortunately, the brother-in-law and May's sister have not had contact with Maya's husband, Larry, which I'm not surprised by based on the stuff that we were already seeing when we first covered this. But unfortunately, it seems like they've also not had contact with the couple's 3 children. Quote, Larry's been pushing everybody away. He's been closing doors. Now, what's interesting about this is we're talking about the private investigator's effort here, but it seems like someone else kind of worked in an investigative capacity and did get into the actual house and conduct a little investigation of his own. We're going to get to that. To another article at fox5sandiego.com, we all want answers. Missing mom's case nears 3-month mark. The police department reassured the public Monday that detectives are doing all they can to find Maya Millete, also known as May. And the 3-month mark is this week. Chula Vista Police are saying that bringing Millete home safely remains their top priority. Quote, we understand and recognize the sense of frustration from May's family and the community with each passing day. We all want answers, Police Chief Roxana Kennedy said. Our detectives have been conducting searches, follow-ups, and following every tip or lead received. I want to thank those that have reached out with information and tips to our detectives. Cases like this hinge on the smallest piece of information, which may lead to a break in the investigation. Due to the sensitivity of this case, we will not share details and compromise this investigation. And I think it's hard to knock that approach, particularly with a case of this nature. It looks like a very straightforward case, and I'm sure they don't want to risk getting this thing into a courtroom and then having, the defense bring up, hey, you guys didn't do this properly, or this person went and leaked that information, and that's why this happened over there. I get that they have to be extremely cautious, particularly probably in a case that looks so straightforward. But it is also curious that this case has hit just a way different level of media exposure, even compared to back to when we originally covered it. This is just in a whole different national coverage level area now. And it just brings up that question for me. There's no questions that the Chula Vista PD can put to the public that could potentially help them if they had some more feedback on that. I mean, some of the information I'm hearing is that Larry might have supposedly gone to the beach for a number of hours. We're talking a huge block of time, and we don't at least have some type of call out for trying to support that information. We've got, how many people could be at a public beach that maybe saw Larry at the beach at that time? Could that be helpful? I would think so. It might be more helpful if he wasn't at the beach, and you've got this huge megaphone in terms of national coverage on this case now, but we are still not hearing that question either. Did you see this man on this particular day? If so, where did you see him? Because that's really, I think, the type of questioning that will help lead to finding where May is. Let's go ahead and continue at the New York Daily News. Missing California mom Maya Millete was about to file for divorce. Of course, we did touch on this a little bit at the end of the last episode, but we've got some more details. Apparently, on the last day she was seen, she did actually go and meet with the at the legal office that she was going to hire to process this divorce. She filled out an intake form with them, and then she set up her follow-up date, which was the following Tuesday, I believe, that she was going to go in for her first official meeting on this. So the day she disappears, effectively, she is taking a very big step in setting her divorce into motion. A family attorney, Billy Little Jr., told CBS 8 last week that Larry spent much of 2020 leveling various allegations against his wife to friends and family. So now we get a new attorney that's talking about this case. What's this about? Quote, he started by complaining to family members. He started by accusing his wife, May, of having an affair, going to her supervisor, insisting that male coworkers be moved to, to another department or out of interacting with her. And with absolutely no evidence that there was an affair going on, Little said. And he has a bunch more information. As a matter of fact, there's a video that's been put up of a in-depth interview with him. I'm going to have a link to that at the top of the links in the sources down below. It's 18 minutes long. It's got a lot of his observations. And I mean, we know that this is a case where, you know, all eyes are on Larry, but after watching that interview, even more so, there's some things that he noticed that are just really, really hard to shake. We're going to touch on a couple of them as we go through these articles here. Billy Little, so the attorney that we mentioned in the last article, this article is saying he's an attorney at the Cold Case Foundation. The Cold Case Foundation is, if it's the same one, I've actually been in contact with some people there, and essentially it's kind of what it sounds like. It's an organization where I think primarily volunteers get together to put together new teams to look into cold cases. I'm not familiar with Billy in particular through my association with the Cold Case Foundation, but it seems like he's related to maybe one of their teams that are helping with this case. It's interesting to me, though, because Cold Case Foundation, like I said, they're cold cases, and effectively he's on the scene here within a matter of days of her disappearance. I don't think that kind of fits their norm for the cases they take on. But he said that Larry, the husband, allowed him to walk through their house on January 11th. Quote, the windows were all open. The fans were on full blast. It was a little chilly. It looked like he had been cleaning. I talked to him a little bit. I asked if I could see the bedroom. I went up to the bedroom. That's when I saw the hole in the door right next to the door handle. Larry allegedly blamed the hole in the door on Maya. So in the full video, you get much more explanation about this. He describes it as about 10 inches wide and 6 to 8 inches tall, like a big square. And he doesn't actually see a hole. He sees a patch. He sees that it's a hole that's been repaired. And the location of where it is in the door, if it was an open hole, you would actually be able to reach through the door and then unlock the door simply by bending your hand as it goes through the hole. Kind of curious about that. Also, and I haven't seen this really referred to in these other articles, he mentions that when he goes into the actual bedroom, he sees another hole that's in a wall, and that's also been patched. This hole in particular in the door, he says that the material that was used to patch it is still wet. So a lot of big considerations here, and we have him in the house basically on the weekend of her disappearance. So Billy Little, who also in the video describes himself as an attorney but also an investigator, starts reaching out to multiple family members, to friends, and collecting information on Larry's communication about their relationships. And this picture comes up in that communication. It's some sort of, Billy describes it as a blood shrine. And we can see from the caption here that Larry sent this picture to his wife's family in September. And there's a photograph of Larry and May together. We can see there's candles burning around this, and there's some type of red substance that's been dripped all over all of this. I can't say if it's blood for certain. I mean, there's red candles here. I would probably assume it might be red wax, but either way, kind of just a visually gripping image, I think you could say. Larry did not respond to multiple questions about the picture of the altar. Some other things Billy talks about in the longer extended interview. He talks about a freezer that was stored in the garage that went missing. Apparently it was picked up by a family member that particular weekend. He tracks it down. He tracks down the freezer and he gets a photograph of it, and it is being used by this other family member. Just seems to be a bit of a strange coincidence that it happened that same weekend. So it's weird because you hear about something like that. Oh my God, a freezer goes missing. And you think that's a very strong investigative lead. He chases it down. He finds the freezer. It's not that strong of a lead, but for the strong information, obviously the hole in the door, the fact that all the windows are open, fans are blowing this whole house out. He says you can't smell anything in the house. He was kind of cautious of that. He wanted to see if there was like the smell of cleaning supplies while he was going through the house, or even possibly a body while he was going through the house. He said you can't smell anything because there's so many fans and the air is just pouring through this house. The story that Larry gave about that is the air conditioner was broken, so he had to have all the windows open and be doing that. If I recall correctly, he also describes Larry as being in the act of cleaning when he shows up. A lot of very tough considerations in that video, and I really hope if you've got an extra 18 minutes that you'll go ahead and click on that link down below after we're done here. But let's go ahead and continue with another article over at Fox News. Missing woman's husband planned murder-for-hire scheme targeting alleged boyfriend, according to a witness. The witness, who heard the conversations firsthand, told Fox News exclusively that Larry Millete frequently discussed paying someone $20,000 to kill his missing wife's alleged boyfriend. The lawyer, Little, did also talk about this avenue, and he did look into some of these supposed relationships that May was having with other people. He says for one of the specific things that Larry was accusing her of, that he could find no information to support it whatsoever. And that's not saying that he did for the second one. It just seems like his investigation was stopped before he could go any further. He effectively was asked to stop in much of the same way that the private investigator that was donating his time was. You know, Chula Vista PD basically just said, hey, no, we can't have you risk this. We don't want you talking to people. Just stop. Larry Millete, quote, seemed pretty serious, the witness said, about the alleged murder-for-hire plot. He allegedly started concocting the plan last summer when he first suspected his wife was seeing someone else, but he also mentioned it as recently as January 4th, which is only a few days before she goes missing. Larry did not respond to multiple questions from Fox News about the alleged murder-for-hire plot. And that's just kind of a normal trend we're seeing when it comes to Larry and some of these tougher questions. But what's interesting to me is some publications are getting him to respond. We're going to see that we get a response from him in one of these publications about the attorney, Mr. Little. But Maya Millete's family and friends have looked for her on a weekly basis since she went missing, most recently searching East Chula Vista on Saturday. I just want to echo it again. I told you guys how much I was moved by it in the first video. Here we are 3 months later, the family taking every opportunity every week to go out there and go look, and doing press and interviews around all that still constantly. These are people that obviously love Maya very deeply and aren't going to give up. Larry has not assisted in any search over the last couple of months. The Chula Vista Police Department, meanwhile, is continuing to investigate all potential leads. Quote, this is an ongoing case with detectives working on it continuously since day one, said Eric Thunberg, a spokesperson for the CVPD. We have no suspects at this point, but we certainly have people who remain crucial witnesses to her disappearance. We are in frequent communication with our regional partners about this case and are working to identify evidence, locate it, analyze it, and follow where it leads. Thankfully, one of those partners that they are working with is the FBI. So they are helping on this case as well. So that freezer I mentioned, here's a picture of it, I believe at its new location with the family member that came to pick it up. Little said he had been collecting evidence in the case, including hundreds of messages sent in 2020 by Larry. Once again, just echoing the same thing. He was complaining to family members. He was accusing May of having an affair, but there was no evidence to actually support it. He was also getting into biblical quotes about adulterous women. And here they have an example from June 28th that read in part, her feet go down to death, her steps lead straight to the grave. The text messages that he, Larry, sent numbered sometimes in the hundreds per day, said Little. So is this information getting to the investigation? Are they even at least listening? I mean, if nothing else, this attorney/investigator got into the house really quickly. And admittedly, I believe Larry let the police into the house for kind of initial searches as well. And then they came back for a true forensic search after they got a warrant. I think it was 2 weeks later. Chula Vista Police will not talk about evidence in the case, but Captain Thunberg with the investigation unit confirmed detectives have been in contact with Little. We're aware of the instances he's described, and he may not be aware of what our detectives have done, but we have in fact followed up and conducted follow-up and continue to conduct follow-up. I think he's trying to make a point there. I think he's trying to let Mr. Little know that they're following up. News 8 reached out to the husband, Larry Millete, and he texted us the following messages regarding Little's walkthrough of his house. Quote, "He lied and presented himself as NCIS to gain access into my home. He misrepresented himself to gain access to my family's home as well, claiming to be NCIS. He lies and misrepresents himself, posing to be law enforcement. Also, I'm not quite sure if impersonating NCIS is a crime, but it should be." Little, the attorney, denied that he posed as a law enforcement officer or NCIS to gain access to the Millete home. But once again, I do just want to point out, I believe at the start of that YouTube video, he calls himself an investigator. Did he present himself as an investigator? Does he have a license to practice private investigating in California? Is that what he showed at the door to Larry to help get him in or something along those lines? I don't know. Now, personally, I've heard enough stories of private investigators not being honest about who they are with people that they're investigating, but not to necessarily represent themselves as law enforcement. That's not a typical method that I understand from what private investigators would be doing. Maya's sister, Mary Chris, told News 8 that the family is asking for guidance from Chula Vista Police to suggest general areas where the teams should be searching. Keep in mind, they're pulling these efforts together. They're going out week after week. They're running out of places. Like, how do they know where to look next? Quote, "If we knew where to go and had an idea of where to search that's consistent with the route that was traveled, yeah, we would share the information. But at this point, we're still working to determine where those areas may be," said Captain Thunberg. Big challenge in this case that the attorney, Mr. Little, brought up is it seems like this mystery pocket of time when Larry was supposedly at the beach, which could be a number of hours, he didn't take his phone with him. It looks like his phone was left at home. If that information's accurate, and I'm just going to put it out there because, we don't know this source. We're not getting this from a, reliable source per se. That would certainly explain why the police department is having trouble identifying potential locations. If Larry did have his phone and he went for a drive and he went for a number of hours in a particular direction, could they then tell the family, hey, you might want to search out in this particular area? Yes. And I'm even wondering if that actually did occur previously, because if you recall from the last episode, the family wound up searching at the campgrounds where they had been the previous weekend together, which weren't very close to the home. And I was wondering back then, what prompted them to look at this? I bet it would have been learning about this gap of time where Larry was supposedly missing, doing the simple math of he could have driven out to that location, hidden Maya's body, and then gotten home within that time frame. And maybe that prompted it. But not having confirmation of, yeah, we have his GPS. We can see that he was actually out there. Back to the quote. "If and when we have information that we can provide that gives us specific areas, we would absolutely use the public's help." So it certainly seems like they're open to the possibility of the public helping them. And we know that the public has been rallying around support in this case, both in terms of donations to the GoFundMe, which is substantial at this point, but outside of that, the volunteers that are going out week after week to help with this. It's just, I think it's a tough case. I think it's a tough case because of that aspect of it happening within four walls. And then if you do have Larry taken off and he's leaving his phone behind, the method that we would usually use to trace someone, at least the easier of the methods, has been taken out of play. I think the private investigator, the volunteer one, brought up an interesting point about the highway cameras, about trying to track the license plates, maybe looking. We know that the police did take Maya's vehicle into evidence. So it could be something along those lines that at some point they're able to identify, hey, we've got highway cams. We can see her car was here, here, and here. That puts us in this general direction. And maybe they could share that information back with the family and say, you guys want to do searches in this particular area. But it's a tough case. It's a tough case. And if things were already hard in terms of the considerations around Larry, 3 months later, seems like they're getting a lot harder. We've got some anonymous source, obviously someone that's protecting their identity, saying he was talking about potential murder for hire situation. We've got chains of communication with family members where he's accusing her of being in an affair of some kind, biblical messages. There seems to be a pattern of escalation here that I think is very concerning. But that's where I'm going to leave it for now. What do you guys think? Let's talk about that in the comments down below. And as always, I ask that we remain respectful to the victims, respectful to the families, respectful to the facts, but also respectful to each other. I don't know, guys. I want to see her found. I want to see her found. And then I want to know what the path to justice is from there. And I don't know how close, I don't know how much closer we are to that 3 months in. Before I end today's video, I want to thank several new patrons. Thank you so much, Thigh Anomaly. Thank you, Jessica Lennox. And thank you, Pinky Sherman. Also, a big thank you to Emma Natal for increasing her pledge. If you'd like to support the channel, please visit lordnarts.com, where you can sign up for Patreon, sign up for PayPal, buy merchandise, or just buy us a coffee. We've got that option there too. We really appreciate your support so we can continue helping these families. We can't do it without you. Take care, and I'll be back on Friday with a brand new episode of Brain Scratch right here on the Lord Narts channel.